Energy Week 2021. This is our favorite event of the year because we get to talk about the future of New Hampshire.
We're excited to explore our path to 2030 with you through a great lineup of events that bring together business, policy, and community leaders across the state
to discuss progress, innovation, emerging technologies, and new opportunities.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can best bridge the gap between politics and policy in the course of pursuing climate action over the next decade.
Your resilience and commitment to clean energy makes New Hampshire a better place to live and work.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work together.
We are all a part of New Hampshire's energy future.
We wish you were all here with us, but we're going to do it virtually this year.
You don't want to miss this year's New Hampshire Energy Week ceremony, so make sure to sign up today. See you there.
See you there.
Hope to see you there.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Brien with the Nature Conservancy, and I'm pleased to introduce a message from our next speaker, U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Shaheen, and thank you for inviting me to take part in New Hampshire Energy Week. I wish we could all be together in person today to share our ideas about our energy future. I want to thank Clean Energy New Hampshire, the Nature Conservancy, and all of the partners who have worked so hard to make this event a success. I would also like to congratulate all of this year's Energy Champion Award winners. Your resilience and commitment to clean energy makes New Hampshire a better place to live and work. As everyone here knows, it's been a difficult year with the pandemic and economic downturn. In fact, more than 400,000 clean energy jobs were lost in 2020. But I'm optimistic for the future of clean energy in our country. Investing in clean and renewable energy resources is critical to tackling climate change and strengthening our economy. That's why I'm so glad that President Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement and is hosting the Earth Day Leaders Summit to show a renewed commitment to global leadership. Here in Congress, we must take advantage of this momentum to make meaningful progress. With passage of the American Rescue Plan and a renewed focus on infrastructure, we can bring the pandemic under control and put people to work building the clean energy economy of the future. That's why I'm focused on policies and investments like weatherization and encouraging energy efficiency in our buildings and in the transportation sector. Better integrating renewables like solar, wind, and biomass is also important to improving the resilience of our electric grid. And we should also encourage new and exciting projects like offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine. Investing in clean energy sources will benefit New Hampshire and create jobs across New England. I look forward to working with my colleagues in Congress and the Biden administration to do just that. Thank you again, and enjoy New Hampshire Energy Week.
Welcome. I'm Madeline Minot, the Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. We are New Hampshire's leading clean energy advocacy organization with a strong membership of over 500 individuals, businesses, organizations, and municipalities. We're excited to be the first to officially welcome you to the 2021 Virtual New Hampshire Energy Week. This year's events may look and feel different from previous years, but I guarantee you that if you're as committed as we are to clean energy, you will find today's kickoff event and the events over the next 2 weeks very informative, engaging, and compelling. Of course, it would be impossible to do any of this without the generous support of our sponsors. Natixis is our 2021 Apex sponsor. They are joined by premier sponsors Coca-Cola Northeast and New Hampshire Saves. Additional sponsors this year include Crest Forum, Timberland, Eversource, Nixon Peabody, New Hampshire Housing, Olivewood Energy, and Worthen Industries. These leading businesses and organizations not only recognize the importance of promoting a clean energy future in New Hampshire, they also provide excellent examples of the intersection and importance of action on clean energy through an economically sound business lens. We are grateful for their support and leadership. Clean Energy New Hampshire is dedicated to supporting policies and programs that strengthen our state's economy, protect public health, and conserve our natural resources. This is why we are proud to be an organizing partner of New Hampshire Energy Week. Over the next hour, you'll hear national, regional, and local examples of clean energy leadership, as well as what is needed to move us forward to 2030 and beyond. As we transition to our keynote speaker, I encourage you to take a few minutes to sign up for the great lineup of virtual events we have taking place the rest of this week and next week, including our Energy Champion Award ceremony. You can use the link below. Thank you again for choosing to spend your time with us and being part of our collective clean energy future. Enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Farrington, Executive Vice President with Natixis Investment Managers, the New Hampshire Energy Week Apex sponsor. Natixis is proud to sponsor Energy Week because of our commitment to environmental, social, and governance investing, including energy transition. We're also proud to introduce today's keynote speaker, Jerry Taylor. Jerry is the president of the Niskanen Center. Prior to founding the center in 2014, Mr. Taylor spent 23 years at the Cato Institute, where he served as Director of Natural Resource Studies, Assistant Editor of Regulation Magazine, Senior Fellow, and then Vice President. Before that, Mr. Taylor was the Staff Director for the Energy and Environmental Task Force at the American Legislative Exchange Council. Over the past 2 decades, Mr. Taylor has been one of the prominent and influential libertarian voices in energy policy in Washington. He's the author of numerous policy studies and has testified before Congress. Mr. Taylor is routinely featured in prominent media outlets, including The New Yorker, The Washington Post, The New York Times, along with many others. We are grateful to have him provide our keynote today, focused on the critical intersection of business, economic viability, and a clean energy future. With that, I give you Mr. Jerry Taylor.
Hello, my name is Jerry Taylor. I'm the president of the Niskanen Center, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can best bridge the gap between politics and policy in the course of pursuing climate action over the next decade. Well, it's a very good question, and the answer is somewhat tricky. The reality is that climate change has now become a matter of partisan identity. Conservative Republicans are skeptical about the reality of climate change and the case for aggressive governmental responses to the same. Democrats, and particularly liberals, are far more accepting of climate science and far more persuaded by the case for action to address the problem. But once an issue has become cleaved by those kind of partisan differences, it's really, really difficult for policy activists to kick down the door of opposition, especially if they come from the Democratic community or the environmentalist community, two communities which are not seen very kindly by conservative Republicans, who are the audience that we need to reach, right? I mean, we would have had ambitious and meaningful climate policies by now had it not been for opposition from the conservative wing of the Republican Party. And so if you're going to get to people like that, you're going to have to get first to the people who they listen to, conservative political elites, media elites, and trusted members of that community. Because if you don't, you're running into a tremendous amount of headwind from people who they trust a lot more than they're going to trust you or me or some of the people in this audience. And there are a lot of conservatives who do respect the case for climate action, who do embrace the idea that it's critically important that we pay attention to science, and that responding to climate change is not an anti-market response. It can be a very pro-market response, and it's not bad for the economy. It's actually good for the economy. I mean, after all, it's not conservative to play dice with the future of the planet. That's a very difficult proposition to accept. But the reality is if we're going to kick down the door of opposition to climate action, the first door we have to kick down are the doors that are between us and conservative elites, because it's only by convincing them that we're going to have much impact on conservatives writ large. Well, the clean energy economy is the future, whether the state of New Hampshire acts or not. Fossil fuels are a declining part of the investment portfolio of energy investors. And in fact, 2/3 of all the investments in new energy today are in clean energy. And that's not largely because of subsidies, preferences, mandates, orders, or anything of the kind. It's because clean energy is less expensive than fossil fuels when it comes to building out future capacity and the various secondary investments one must make in the energy economy. So the reality is it's coming, and it's not going to be held off. The question is how quickly it's going to come and who will be the market leaders. This is the assessment of BlackRock and virtually every single significant investor in the energy economy. It's the judgment of market actors who have skin in this game and who stand to profit or loss by the bets they're making on the future. In other words, virtually no one is of the mind that the fossil fuel economy that we grow up with is very long for the day. We've seen the coal economy collapse, not because of orders or regulations or subsidies, but because coal is simply more expensive than other sources of energy. We're beginning to see that now in the oil and gas industry as well. You can see that in the valuations of these oil and gas companies, which have been declining dramatically. Today, according to the data we have, in most parts of the world and in most sectors of the economy, green energy is actually cheaper, even on an unsubsidized basis, than is fossil fuels. But the reason we didn't get it all yesterday is because it requires an infrastructure, which does cost money, just like oil and gas requires an infrastructure. But we've had over a century to pay for that infrastructure and centuries of investments, right? All the gasoline stations and pipelines and derricks and refining facilities, they weren't built in a week or a year or even a decade. They were built over the course of a long period of time. And these are the kind of investments that we have to make in the green energy economy. The challenge for climate activists, of course, is that it's not changing fast enough for us to decarbonize on a global basis by 2050, which is a critical need if we're going to hold global warming to a at least somewhat manageable phenomenon. Even decarbonization by 2050 isn't going to render climate change manageable in any real sense of the word, but at least it will hedge against the catastrophic effects that we could very well see. But if we don't decarbonize by 2050, we're going to get those catastrophic effects with very much higher chances than we might otherwise have done. And so we can't just sit back and let market actors take care of the problem for us. They are taking care of the problem. They're just not able to take care of it fast enough without government assistance. It will be a green energy, dominant energy economy, whether we like it or not, or whether conservative Republicans like it or not, because that's where market actors are going. And if we believe in the efficiency of markets and the wisdom of the crowds in the free enterprise system, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. It's technological innovation. And yeah, there's going to be a tremendous amount of jobs associated with green energy as well. It's essentially manufactured energy. In other words, it's a great opportunity to rebuild America's manufacturing capacity. That argument can be made about every single political entity on the planet. This takes collective action. Even China, in and of itself, is too small to make a difference if it were to decarbonize and the rest of the world did not. So the reality is we all need to carry our weight in this game. New Hampshire has to carry its weight, and Wyoming has to carry its weight, and Illinois has to carry its weight, and the United States has to carry its weight. It's sort of like saying, I need to lose 50 pounds, so I need to go on a diet. But if I forego eating this donut, what difference does it make? Well, a donut's not going to make the difference in your diet. But if you eat donuts, you're not going to lose the weight that you need to lose. And decarbonization is essentially putting ourselves on a carbon diet, which means that no one policy step and no one policy initiative is going to, pass the test of will this stop global warming or will this have some significant impact on warming in and of itself. There's very little that any of us can do or that any government can do that can meet that test. But the reality is that it is absolutely immoral to contribute to a problem like climate change which is going to doom our children and grandchildren to a far greater degree of ecological and environmental and economic misery and harm their life expectancy and their well-being simply because no one independently decided that they had to do what they individually could to alleviate those harms. A lot of conservatives are less concerned about sea level rise or whatnot than they are about the economic costs of acting. We can do all of this without, throwing away Milton Friedman books or anything of the kind by simply imposing a fee on fossil fuel emissions or a carbon tax, and then recycle that money back to the taxpayers. Which means, one, we don't pay any additional tax on balance. We're simply paying more for carbon-based energy than we otherwise would, which disincentivizes us to use it. We all know prices have consequences, or at least conservative Republicans seem to know that, or at least sometimes say they understand that. So if we make something more expensive, we're going to buy less of it. You're not jeopardizing the free enterprise system. Heck, by going this route, you're making it work even more efficiently, because that's another thing that free market economists and conservatives will tell you. The reason that free market economies outperform socialist economies is that the price signals people get are accurate. Well, right now, the price signals for carbon-based energy are not accurate. They are not including the environmental and the future environmental and economic damages associated with using fossil fuels. And that's why we have a problem. We have a distorted set of price signals because we are subsidizing the costs of future damages and even present damages to people. And we need to stop that. There are Republican politicians, there are not a ton of them, but they're out there who do support climate action and ostensibly ambitious climate action. The reality is this requires global collective action on a massive scale.
Greetings. I'm Rob Werner, New Hampshire State Director for the League of Conservation Voters, and I'm happy to introduce Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Energy, Tarak Shah, in support of New Hampshire Energy Week. Tarak has spent the last decade of his life working on his lifelong passion of combating climate change. From organizing coalitions to working at the highest levels of the U.S. government, Tarak has designed and implemented policies that have contributed to the clean energy revolution. From 2014 to 2017, he served as Chief of Staff to the Undersecretary for Science and Energy at DOE. Earlier in his career, Tarak served at the Pentagon, spearheading efforts to optimize the U.S. military's energy use, and at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Prior to his time in government, Tarak worked for then Senator Barack Obama in a variety of roles on his 2004 and 2008 presidential campaigns and his transition team. I give you Tarak Shah.
Hello, New Hampshire Energy Week. My name is Tarak Shah, and I'm the Chief of Staff at your U.S. Department of Energy. And I am so honored to be here with you to help you kick off an amazing week. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this week, it's that you are in the right place at the right time. As a nation, this is the moment where we decide, for once and for all, that there is no going backwards and that the just, clean energy future is our path forward. All of us here understand that a changing climate means an uncertain future. Our jobs, our transportation systems, our ecosystems, our health, they all depend on a clean energy future. Maybe you're here as a policymaker, or you work in the energy sector, or you pay an electricity bill and you're wondering what the clean energy economy means for you. Whatever the reason, I know that you will be critical in achieving New Hampshire's ambitious 2025 clean energy goals. But if the climate fight teaches us anything, it's that we're all in this together. And New Hampshire's target is a key part of President Biden's nationwide plan to reach 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035. Now, I've been in this job since President Biden's inauguration, and we at DOE are doing our part to move 1,000,000 miles a minute. We've been rolling out new efforts to research, develop, and deploy clean technologies that will upgrade our energy system, making it cleaner and safer. And we're doing all of this with an eye towards maximizing the potential for new jobs within every one of our funding opportunities and announcements. Since January alone, we've announced over $500 million in new funding to support projects in cutting-edge solar, in clean vehicles, and in efficient water infrastructure. And in the past 2 weeks, we've rolled out 2 ambitious new plans. One to cut the cost of solar energy by more than half by 2030, and another to add 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy to our grid, also by 2030. And New Hampshire innovators are leading the way. For example, we recently awarded $750,000 to Dartmouth to research next-generation solar energy systems. New Hampshire's private sector is leading the way as well. In Durham, we recently awarded $1.8 million to a company called Regrow to develop new ways to measure the carbon in our soils. So it's clear that New Hampshire and the U.S. will be inventing the technologies of the future. The question is, will we be making them here? And that really hinges on President Biden's recently announced American Jobs Plan. That plan would modernize our electricity transmission grid and add clean power to get to 100% zero carbon electricity. It would expand our EV charging network by 500,000 and jolt American EV manufacturing. It would have states and cities and union workers across this country upgrading commercial and government and residential buildings. And at DOE, we're going to be working with Congress over the next several months to turn this plan into a bipartisan bill for the president's signature. So my ask to you this week is that you join us in this fight for our clean energy future. We can't do this without you. The world is depending on us. New Hampshire is depending on us. So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work together. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jack Ruderman, Manager of Public Affairs at New Hampshire Housing. I am excited to be serving as moderator for today's live panel on emerging opportunities and New Hampshire's path forward to a clean energy future. New Hampshire Housing is proud to be a sponsor of Energy Week. Our mission is to promote, finance, and support affordable housing in the Granite State. Affordability is measured not just in rent or mortgage costs, but in utility and energy costs as well. Reducing these costs is critical to keeping housing affordable for developers, tenants, and homeowners. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to give a quick thank you to our Apex sponsor of this year's Energy Week, Natixis, and remind you all to use the link in the description below to sign up for the upcoming events later this week and next week, including the Energy Champions Award Ceremony. Now, to our panelists for today's discussion. First, Howie Weems. Howie is the longtime general manager of the Mount Washington Auto Road and Great Glen Trails, and one of the driving forces behind the return of the Glen House Hotel. Howie retired last year and now consults for his former employer and holds the position of president of the Glen House LLC. He will be sharing his expertise with us on community-based businesses with an emphasis on the ski industry. Our second panelist is Henry Hurden, an energy consultant under contract with the City of Lebanon, working to launch the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. Henry will be speaking to pursuing community power and other municipal sustainability goals. Our third panelist is Sandra Jones. Sandra is the director and founder of the Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiative and will be speaking to delivering renewable energy benefits to low-income residents. Our final panelist is Howard Callett. Howard is the co-chair of the Rye Energy Committee and will be speaking to opportunities in communities where existing or emerging technologies are taking hold. Thank you all for joining us for this important conversation. Today's panel is going to be focused on emerging energy opportunities in New Hampshire and our path forward to a clean energy future. Why are we all invested in this work? What's happening in our communities? How are these policies touching down on the ground? Our first question is for Howard with the Rye Energy Committee. Howard, we're hearing big things are coming for offshore wind across the region. And there's currently a New Hampshire Senate Study Commission looking at the industry and port development topics. As a representative from a coastal community, what are some of the things your committee is thinking about regarding offshore wind? Do you see potential for large amounts of renewable energy to power our state from this resource?
Jack, that's really an excellent question. Obviously, as a coastal community, we're very concerned about sea level rise. Many folks probably don't know that roughly 2/3 of Rye is tidal or undevelopable land because it's wetland. And a few years ago, I believe it was 2018, there was actually flooding along Route 1A, Ocean Boulevard. So sea level rise is a big issue. And there are studies from the state of Maine that roughly if they harness 5% of the energy available for wind energy from Maine, that they could power and heat every single home in Maine through the use of mini splits. So when you think about that, that's just a huge resource that's available and that we're quite interested in seeing how that scales up through feasibility studies and developing that technology. It's just a huge resource. So very excited about offshore wind.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question is for Henry. Henry, following on the train of thought of local energy action and magnifying it to make a large impact, can you fill us in on the status of community power programs? How close are we to seeing a program get off the ground? And what key aspects of community power excite you the most as providing new benefits to New Hampshire communities?
Thanks for the question, Jack. So before I dive into responding to the question, I just want to flag for the audience that there's a lot of really good information on a new website, www.cpcnh.org. So please check that out. But as far as the status of community power, we can think of it in three categories. Coalition formation, category number one. Category number two, local community organizing towards program launches. And third, state regulation. So we're going to take those one at a time. And to start with, the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, or the Coalition. This is an organization that a group of leading communities since late 2019, I've been meeting regularly to collaborate, to research national best practices, and to chart a path forward for the state, really benefiting from a lot of the top national expertise in the country with regard to community power. And those communities include the city of Lebanon, the city of Nashua, Hanover, and Cheshire County. And what that group has really come to understand over the past year of collaboration is that the coalition model for community power is really the gold standard. And that's what we're striving for here in New Hampshire. So what these communities have done, pooled their expertise and have come together to establish a joint action agency. What that is a public nonprofit entity that is controlled and governed by its member cities, towns, and counties. And there's a number of benefits to this approach that I'll just touch on very quickly, but really a coalition model is designed to achieve a significant economy of scale in power procurements and the quality of services. And there's sort of three aspects to this. One is the ability to streamline the launch process for cities and towns by facilitating knowledge sharing, regional collaborations, and things of that nature. And really longer term, build New Hampshire-based energy resources that directly benefit our local economy and our communities through that economy of scale in terms of joint power solicitations and project development. Another aspect of the coalition is empowering communities to speak with one voice in legislative and regulatory affairs. And some of us saw a little bit of the potential of that with the House Bill 315 saga, let's call it, where there was some legislation introduced this year that would have gutted the community power law as introduced. And as a result of coalition leadership and really leadership from many communities coming together to partner on this issue, turning that bill around, rewriting it by amendment through a collaborative process, and now really making it into something that's a net gain for the state. So sort of back to where the coalition is, in January, its corporate charter was approved by the New Hampshire Attorney General as compliant with New Hampshire law. And earlier this year, Lebanon and Hanover became the first two communities to vote to join that coalition. So the coalition, it's designed, it's sort of open for business, and it's in the process of onboarding some of those organizing group members, City of Nashua, Cheshire County, and really open invitation to all of the cities and towns out there working on community power to join that organization and benefit from its resources. Two other points I want to make quickly. So that's the coalition. In terms of local community mobilization and organizing, there are perhaps a dozen cities and towns that have taken the first steps towards forming electric aggregation committees. And we're really expecting a lot more communities to get involved with Roadmap to Community Power 2022. That's a program being designed by the coalition to support communities to sort of get on track to that 2022 town meeting authorization to kick things off for community power for New Hampshire. And again, there's lots of information on cpcnh.org, so please check that out. Final thing I'll say, Jack, state regulation. State regulation. So Governor Sununu, he signed the community power law on August 2nd, I believe, 2019. That's more than a year and 8 months ago, and we have yet to see regulatory rules come out of the Public Utility Commission. So that will affect the pace at which those rules come out will affect the ability of this market to get off the ground. So just sort of in summary, it's possible we'll see initial programs launched this year, depending on the pace of the regulatory rules and some of those community processes. It's also possible that early next year could be the beginning of the community power market. Back to you, Jack.
Ground. Sounds like you're making some headway despite a few frustrating roadblocks along the way, but sounds like things are moving in the direction that it really could change the way a lot of folks in New Hampshire towns and cities buy their power. Howie, I have a question for you. During your time with the Mount Washington Auto Road, Great Glen Trails, and the Glen House, you ran a considerable tourist destination, major local landmark, and economic driver. You also championed clean energy. What parallels can you draw between clean energy and benefits to New Hampshire communities? What advice would you share with communities across the state?
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be part of this panel. I've got to bring it down quite a few levels to the more granular area and tell you a little bit about what I've been doing over the past several decades. I've had the great good fortune to be able to manage these companies for the family, and a lot of people don't realize that the Mount Washington Auto Road is a private operation, and it's actually been in the same family for over 100 years now. So when I was put in place as manager, I'm not part of the family. 34 or 5 years ago, it was something new for the company, and it worked out well. I was able to do a lot over those decades that aligned with my personal philosophy, and fortunately, the directors, the family members, also agreed with all of these things. And I just want to run through what we've done over the years so that people can realize that you can do a lot up here, even in northern New Hampshire. You just have to have a will to want to do it. And most of them are not only good for the environment, they're good clean energy projects, but with all of the advances in technology recently, it's easy to make a business case for heading off in this direction. Historically, the Glen House was the first on the scene way back in the mid 1850s, and they actually had a waterworks that came down off the side of the mountain that they provided their domestic water with, but they also generated energy, DC energy. So we were able to upgrade that hydro system a number of years ago. It turns out it had a 5-year payback, and now we've got a 10 kW system helping out with the energy costs in the day lodge at the base of the auto road. It actually provides about 80% of our needs. Then we put in car chargers quite a while ago frankly, before there were many electric cars. I wanted to take away any barrier to anybody wanting to come up here with an electric car and be afraid of not being able to recharge when they were up here. We put in a pellet boiler years ago for the lodge heat and domestic hot water, and that has allowed us to avoid purchasing and burning about 5,500 gallons of fuel oil every year. And just as importantly, in bringing it to the community level, our fuel dollars are now spent in the local economy. We're not buying fuel from far away. We're buying wood pellets mostly from Maine and New Hampshire. I started to convert our vans from gasoline to propane years ago when that became possible. I had been searching for electric vans. We're talking 15 years ago, so there was no way there were going to be any electric vans on the scene back then. So we went the propane route sort of as an interim until full-size electric vans become available to do the tours up on Mount Washington. Then we did a full LED upgrade throughout the lodge with the help of Eversource, who has great programs to help you retrofit. We replaced the diesel burning snowmaking pump for our little cross-country center with a much higher efficiency electric pump. But the biggest thing, and one of my biggest goals that I wanted to do before I retired, was to get the Glen House built. We had been 50 years without a Glen House. This is now the 5th one on the scene on that location over the years. And I was determined to make it as sustainable and as great a model of how you can build a commercial building in a sustainable way. So we were able to put in geothermal for heating and cooling of the entire facility. We did a very high level of insulation to help with those energy costs, complete LEDs from the parking lot lights to the smallest decorative lights in the hotel. We have Otis Regen elevators to regenerate a little bit of energy during their operation. We put in another hydro system, little hydro generator, using the same water, just more efficiently, providing about a 17 kW system directly into the hotel. We're now working on a solar array that can knock the electric rate or electric use down, hopefully to zero. And there's a couple of other projects I want to do before we're too many years down the road. So my point is that we can all do our part. You just have to have the will and the imagination to want to do it, frankly. And, you can keep your energy dollars local. The advances in technology, again, I mentioned, make it easier to make the business case. If you've got folks in your ownership group that maybe aren't so sure, you can make a solid business case, particularly these days on solar with the cost coming down all the time. We were able to also take advantage of the USDA REAP grant on one of our projects, and we will be looking at that when we start looking at solar more seriously. So we've provided jobs to the local economy simply through staying as a healthy business, a healthy tourist attraction. We are an economic driver. We bring a lot of people into northern New Hampshire who then end up doing many other things while they're up here. So providing jobs for the local economy, providing jobs through doing all of these energy upgrades, and keeping some of the money local, specifically with a modern wood heat that we're doing now. I think as far as what communities need to do, Gorham's a good example, and I've heard others talking about their energy committees, and Gorham's got a group together, and I can't tell you whether it's a formal energy committee or not, but they are well along in studying installing solar at the two schools and the town hall and the public works building. And it's a matter of getting a few champions together, people that are into it, that can cheerlead and following that and seeing what the grants are that are available and what the path is. But there's multiple paths forward these days. It's actually kind of a fun time to be doing this stuff.
Thank you, Howie. Thank you. Sorry, my voice cut out there for a second. I'm going to move on now to Sandra. Sandra, the past year has shed a lot of light on equity issues, as well as the urgent need to transition to clean energy. Can you fill us in on the work PARE is doing in your region to expand equitable access to clean energy? What are the chief barriers you've had to contend with, and how have you overcome them?
For having me. Great to see you, Jack. Wonderful to be part of this event. Just to talk a little bit about PARE before we get into our newest program, New Hampshire Solar Shares. We've been around since 2004, and I love the earlier remark about carrying our own weight, and if there's a will, there's a way. We believe here in the Plymouth region, where many people are part of the PARE community, that we need to do just that. We need to start with one home, one town, one community, one state, one country, one world at a time. So we are big believers in that way of thinking. So even though we don't have as much going on here in New Hampshire as California and New Jersey, I'm proud to be working with all the energy leaders here today to be making the progress we're making as a state together. I want to tell you about New Hampshire Solar Shares. So New Hampshire Solar Shares is our program where we have the goal of addressing some of those energy equity issues here in our own region. We have just barely scratched the surface, and it's a wonderful program. In fact, of all the programs PARE has started over the years, this is my personal favorite. Back in 2016, we were meeting with the New Hampshire Electric Co-op back then about net metering and other issues. And it was Steve Camarino, the current CEO of the Electric Co-op, that mentioned the idea, what if we started a charitable project where we raised money to build solar arrays, community solar arrays, where all the power produced would go to low-income families that could use a little assistance with their electric bill. And so that idea kind of grew in all of our minds. And so between 2016 and 2018, we met with a number of partners throughout the community, and Squam Lakes Conservation Society, Whole Village Family Resource Center, Granite United Way, all kinds of different community players to talk about this idea. And so what we came up with is the goal of building 125 kW worth of community solar projects as our initial effort. And we did just that. We, in 2018, built a 28 kW solar project on land donated by the common man. A big part of our program is the projects are built on donated space to bring the costs down to build these community solar arrays. And so we built 2 solar pavilions and 3 ground-mounted arrays if you'd like to visit it. It's on Route 3 in front of the Common Man Inn. And then in 2019, we built a second array out in Warren, New Hampshire. Apple Knockers General Store donated a huge amount of roof space, and that also is a 20 kW system. So one of the things that we are so proud about is that over the course of this past year, during the pandemic, when nothing else felt consistent or constant, we had these solar projects that were providing solar credits, direct bill credits to 19 families in our community. And we added it up recently. It was $5,900 in solar energy bill credits that went to families that during the pandemic probably needed that little boost more than ever. So it's a wonderful project to be part of. We're looking to build another project in Rumney or Holderness. And again, I think we're scratching the surface when it comes to bringing in low-income families into solar energy and clean energy projects. And just to talk a little bit about the barriers, I mean, when you think about the cost of installing a solar PV system as a ground mount or a roof mount on your home, even for a small system, we're talking $18,000, $19,000. So when you have a family of four who's living in poverty, where their income level is $26,000, $35,000 a year, investing in an $18,000 solar project is just not going to happen. And low-income families don't have the tax burden, they don't have the disposable income. So it requires projects like New Hampshire Solar Shares, like some of the projects that the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission is sponsoring through their RFP program, through the Renewable Energy Fund. It takes concerted efforts to bring in this demographic into the mix. So I would encourage all communities to be creative, take on that if there's a will, there's a way sort of attitude, and don't forget to include everybody in accessing the savings and the environmental benefits to solar energy, because just because you can't afford to have solar in your home doesn't mean you don't care about climate and you don't want to have solar. And that's one of the biggest things I learned in one of these projects, in our New Hampshire Solar Shares project, is they want to be part of this new energy economy.
Thank you, Sandra. I know, having been in the solar industry myself and having been at the PUC before that probably one of the biggest challenges in solar is making it affordable to everybody, and in particular making it affordable to working folks and low-income folks. So what you guys at Paray have done is truly impressive, and excited to hear that you're going to keep going and look to develop further projects. Well, I think we have time for a few questions here that I can open up to any of our panelists. So I'm going to start off with asking a question about infrastructure. So coming from my current role with New Hampshire Housing, I understand the need for updating our infrastructure to support New Hampshire residents. What energy infrastructure should we prioritize along the path to 2030?
Well, it's an easy one.
I'd like to comment on that from a community, from looking at Rye Energy Committee, where I'm a co-chair. Some of the key items are right now, solar has a long payback. Sandra was just speaking about that. I have solar on my home. I've had it on there for 7 years. And even with the incentives I received, I'm probably a few years out from payback. It's just not a quick payback. If there's any way to incentivize that. Mini splits, really heating and cooling in the future. What can we do to incentivize that? There's just not enough money on the table to have that make sense for many folks today. The programs that Eversource offers through lighting incentives, where we've upgraded public buildings in town, those do have quick paybacks. Those paybacks are probably in the range of 3 years. We're evaluating a program now. We've upgraded our schools and many public buildings. We're also in the middle of a PPA evaluation and hopeful approval on a town-wide basis. Well, for solar panels on our school system. And programs like that, anything that the town can receive funds on a statewide basis to make those projects make sense would be fantastic.
Great. Any of our other
jump in,
panelists
Jack.
want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, can I jump in, Jack?
Yeah, please, Henry.
Yeah, so I really appreciate what Howard's saying, and I kind of want to connect this to this theme of the local energy champions that Howie was talking about in Gorham, and the work we've seen Sandra do, and the work that Howard's doing in Rye, and infrastructure. I mean, it's fantastic to hear about the projects that are at the municipal level or the sort of smaller scale community level. But what community power can do is sort of take that and scale it up a notch, right, and begin providing power to cities and towns as a whole. And that's a way we can ramp up and accelerate and build larger projects and move this clean energy transition along a little bit further. So in terms of infrastructure, a lot of times we think about infrastructure as, okay, let's let the utility company rate base some poles and wires, let's build a new pipeline, like large scale things at the macro level. But there's another way to think about infrastructure where through community power, you're creating a marketplace and you're allowing each city and town to access that marketplace to determine its own infrastructure priorities for itself. So whether that's choosing to build a community solar array to power all your residents and businesses, or to partner with your utility company on upgrading metering infrastructure so we can really modernize the grid and tap into that competitive retail electricity marketplace that a lot of folks like to talk about, talking about price signals, time of use rates, distributed energy storage that can soak up all that cheap solar power during the day, put it back on the grid and get paid, and deploy infrastructure in a way that's distributed, that's resilient, and that really brings the benefit down to the local economy level for each of our communities. So I think that when we think infrastructure, we got to shift our mindset a little bit to more of a market perspective and more of a community distributed resource perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Oh, go ahead, please.
I would just like to add to the infrastructure question. I think over the last few weeks, we've all been listening on the news about the new definition of infrastructure and about that human element that's needed, that we need to invest in as well to support all that needs to happen in the ways that the two of you just spoke about. And being someone in the field, I see a real need for workforce development at some of the more basic levels up to electricians. I see a lot of electricians retiring. We need people that can support all the technology if we are going to be installing more energy storage. So workforce development, job training, and looking at all the different specific tasks that go into building a clean energy economy and creating new doable, affordable trainings around those tasks, because I'm afraid the workforce isn't going to be able to support a lot of the ambitious goals our state and federal government have.
Great point. Thanks, Sandra. I've got another question for the panel. If we could give you a magic policy wand, what would your priorities be for leading New Hampshire along the path to a clean energy economy by 2030?
Can I jump in just really quickly? Just having mentioned energy storage. Yeah. So I've heard that there's a possibility that energy storage might be part of the federal tax credit. And I think that would be a wonderful addition. So if I was to wave my wand, I'd love to see that be part of the solar IRS tax credit to encourage more people to install batteries, because that is appearing to be a key part of reaching that renewable energy electricity goal that one of the previous leaders spoke about.
Anybody else with something on their wish list?
Sure, I agree with what Sandra's saying, but I think, if I had a magic policy wand, that's an interesting question. But in a way, we have a lot of tools at our disposal right now, and it's about making the most use of those tools. And the work that folks in this call have done, and Sandra, that you've done, by really going and implementing the tools that are on the books, there's so much more that can be done. And in particular with community power, it's a new policy, and it's not top down, it's bottom up. So what's required for it to be most successful is for each community to mobilize and to organize. And the process for implementing is every individual community has to form a committee and go to town meeting. So we have policies on the books that we could be making more use of. And I think that there's a lot of exciting potential with what we have. It'd be nice if we could wave a magic wand and just, have the clean energy future, but it doesn't work that way. The only way these things get done is if regular people, community leaders, citizens, elected officials sort of roll up their sleeves and do the hard work that needs to be done to make these things happen. And we have an incredible tool in community power to make that happen now.
I'd just like to expand on what Henry just said. Henry, you may be aware of the fact that in Rye, we are planning with our select board right now for next year to draft and actually have a warrant article to support community power. Our select board is fully aware of our efforts. We're keeping them informed of it, so that they're well aware of our interest to have clean energy available to every resident in Rye at a fair price. And
that's fantastic.
And it's just an invaluable tool to bring to the community.
And it's fantastic that the town of Rye has taken that leadership upon themselves and is moving forward. And I congratulate you. And it's great to see sort of the beginning stages of, Rye, Portsmouth, Exeter, Newmarket, Nashua, many communities in the Upper Valley and the Monadnock region and beyond that are sort of beginning to mobilize in this direction. And it's about giving them the resources and connecting them to make sure they can do it successfully. So looking forward to providing any support we can to Rye and really glad to hear of your leadership, Howard.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I think we're going to wrap up. We're just about out of time. I first want to thank our stellar panelists here. I have to say, like I've mentioned before, I've spent a lot of time in the energy field and just deeply, deeply impressed with everything that each of the panelists brought to today's discussion and the work that's being done by them and others across the state. I want to thank our audience for taking the time to join us. We hope you enjoyed our conversation this morning. Again, Energy Week would not be possible without the support of our Apex sponsor, Natixis, and our additional sponsors. And also a quick reminder, please use the link in the description below to sign up for the upcoming events later this week and next week. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the program.
I hope you enjoyed the program. The Nature Conservancy is proud to be an organizing partner of Energy Week because the science clearly states that in order to mitigate the effects of climate change, we must make rapid and necessary progress towards a clean energy future right here in New Hampshire, around the country, and around the world. I know I speak on behalf of all of today's generous sponsors and organizing partners when I say thank you for choosing to spend your time with us on this critical topic. Speaking of sponsors, we would not be able to conclude today's program without giving an additional thank you to our Apex sponsor, Natixis, and our two premier sponsors, Coca-Cola Northeast and New Hampshire Saves. Thank you for your support and leadership. Oh, and before you go, take 2 minutes to sign up for the engaging virtual events taking place this week and next, including our Energy Champions Award ceremony, just using the link below. As you heard from today's speakers, our clean energy future is in sight, but it can only be achieved when all of us are at the table. Thank you again, and see you at the next event.